In this final lecture on sustainability communication, I'm going to talk about two things: framing and storytelling. So first of all, framing. These are headlines generated by a left-wing publication shortly after the January 6th attacks on the American Capitol. I chose these because at the time, conversation was very polarized. So when anything is uber polarized, what you get is you tend to get extreme framing. And I would call some of this extreme framing, using really emotive language, tapping into people's worldviews and values. So let's look at how people of a more left-wing persuasion interpreted the attacks on the Capitol on January 6th. Republicans across the country are switching parties since the January 6th terrorist attacks, so really be paying attention to language. Trump finally addresses the nation after he unleashed rioters on the Capitol. It's deplorable. Unleashed rioters. Texas paper slams Trump's border visit, calling him unhinged and unrepentant after inciting mob. Unhinged, unrepentant, inciting mob. Impeach Donald Trump, debunk the lies. Tech and social media companies impose restrictions on Republicans, hate groups. So in this last one, it's the connotation is that Republicans equal hate groups. I mean, not directly, but there is that sense within this headline. Okay, let's look at some right-wing headlines. YouTube, Twitter are partisan political tools. An ascendant left silences and excludes its enemies. There's a little bit of a threat in that word ascendant because it makes it sound like the left is taking over. And then, of course, silences and excludes. Trump calls impeachment push a witch hunt that stokes anger. Witch hunt stokes anger. Establishment's threat of impeachment, a confession of failure. It's not censorship, it's a coordinated effort. There's a feeling of real threat behind that term, coordinated effort. What I said was totally appropriate, calls for no violence. Okay, so giving Trump a platform, showing the situation from his side, etc. Okay, so really good example of how things can be framed very differently. Now, that's not to say that we want to lie. What we want to do is we want to convey our message in a way that includes our audience. So instead of making our audience come to us, we go to our audience. So where is our audience at this time? How can we make them feel like they're part of the solution instead of part of the problem? How can we make them feel like they're included in our vision for the future? Okay, now I've assigned you a discussion forum this week, and I'm asking you to choose a piece of sustainability communication that you think is successful. So I'm going to show you two examples that I think are successful, and I'm going to explain to you why. I chose this one because it's so iconic. Most people have seen the turtle video from YouTube where the turtle's got a straw up its nose and someone pulls it out. Why was this so iconic? Why is this so iconic now? And why did it become viral at the time. One word: storytelling. Now, I could give you statistics, and these are made up statistics. Um, 5 million turtles killed each year through plastic pollution. And what do you think? Oh, that's so sad. And then you flick to the next video, right? But if I show you a story and you see that suffering, that connects. The story of one turtle is far more powerful than a statistic about 5 million. So we connected, we felt empathy for this turtle. Humans are by and large empathic creatures, with a few exceptions, of course. When we create a story, we create empathy. That is the power of story. And this video created empathy. And that is the reason it went viral. And that's probably the reason that we have a ban on plastic straws in many places around the country. Okay, let's look at another example. So back in the 90s, and I mean the 1990s, 25 years, give or take, ago, there was a lot of public outrage about Nike's practices of employing child labor in their overseas factories so that they could make more profits, they could get labor super cheap, and so on. Now, prior to this, this growing awareness, people thought that Nike was a pretty good company. It had great marketing, and it was a product that a lot of people really appreciated. So in the 90s, a lot of activists started to draw attention to the problem of child labor and how Nike was exploiting it to create and generate larger profits. So this was not one initiative. This was a collection of many initiatives. And back in the day, of course, the internet wasn't what it is now. There was an internet, but a lot of people didn't have computers yet, and we certainly didn't have smartphones. And so, things weren't communicated on social media the way they are today. And so this buzz was generated primarily through mainstream media. Now, this particular article came out in 1996 in Life magazine, and this was the photo that went with it. So this is a Pakistani boy. He's 12 years old. His name is Tariq, and he was employed by Nike to construct Nike soccer balls, and he made 6 cents an hour. I've included the link to the article. The article is just a superb example of narrative long-form journalism. I highly recommend that you read it if you have time, and it's just a great example of storytelling and how we can connect with an audience on a serious issue. Anyway, this was the photograph that was published along with the article. And so again, you can see that this is much different than telling people every day in Pakistan, children have to work for 6 cents an hour. That sounds really bad, but when we see a face, when we see a person who is actually doing this, all of a sudden, it's very different. It's no longer a statistic. I could say that in 1996, and I'm making this up, 10,000 Pakistani youth were employed in child labor. I have no idea how close I am or how far I am, but off that statistic. Um, but it doesn't matter. Statistics can be useful as supporting evidence and to really drive a point home, but statistics don't sell a message on their own. And I don't think statistics ever sell a message well on their own. Yes, we can have an astonishing statistic and it might be a good hook for a piece, but as the foundation of communication, statistics just aren't as compelling as a single story because in a single story, we see ourselves, we empathize, we embody the emotions and the hardship that we see in a story. Even if we can't properly imagine that story, um, there is that capacity within our brains to attempt to imagine and to feel like we might be imagining it. And that's really powerful. So, as communicators, take every opportunity you can to tap into that. Tap into empathy. Storytelling equals empathy. Empathy is compassion and it moves us to change.